When the living embodiment of grit and grace sits face to face with one of television's most unfiltered hosts, sparks are inevitable. But no one in the studio that morning expected an inferno. What began as a routine interview quickly morphed into a brutal test of patience, wit, and dignity, as Clint Eastwood found himself under relentless fire from Joy Behar. And the legend soon reminded everyone why you never poke the lion too many times. The View studio buzzed with an electric hum as the audience settled in. Every seat was filled, every phone raised. This wasn't just another episode, this was an event. Clint Eastwood, the man whose very name commanded reverence, was in the building. At 94, he strode onto the stage as if he owned it, not with arrogance, but with that quiet, unshakable confidence forged from a lifetime of staring down villains, doubters, and cameras alike. Dressed in a simple, perfectly tailored navy suit, he nodded once to the crowd. The famous squint drew thunderous applause. Across from him sat Joy Behar, glasses perched, expression already sharpened for combat. To the casual viewer, it looked like just another lively talk show. But those who knew Joy's style could see it in her eyes. She wasn't here to celebrate Clint. She was here to challenge him. "Clint Eastwood," Joy began, her tone dripping with that trademark blend of sarcasm and defiance. "Welcome to The View. It's not every day we get a cowboy at our little table." Clint's lips curved into a small, polite smile. "Well, Joy," he said in that gravelly baritone, "I figured it was time to visit the ranch." The audience chuckled. Joy didn't. She leaned forward, fingers steepled, and fired the first real shot. "You've built a career playing cowboys and cops who solve their problems with guns. Don't you think it's time to hang up the hat and let the next generation take over? Maybe Hollywood's had enough of your type." Clint's smile barely shifted, though his jaw tightened slightly. "My type?" he said. "You mean someone who does his job, tells good stories, and doesn't talk down to people? Well, Joy, it seems the audience doesn't mind my type." A few claps rippled through the crowd. Joy waved them off dismissively. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You've been coasting on the same squint and six-shooter since the 60s. Don't you think it's getting old?" Clint tilted his head, measuring her like a gunslinger at high noon. His reply was calm, but it cut clean. "Funny thing about stories that last 60 years, Joy. They're called classics. Maybe that's why people still watch them." Joy rolled her eyes theatrically, but the audience's laughter and applause clearly grated on her. She pressed on. "All right, Clint," she said, flipping through her cue cards. "You directed $1 Million Baby, Fuertad, which I'll admit I thought was overrated. Another movie about boxing? Really? Just another testosterone-fueled vanity project?" Clint's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. He didn't flinch. Leaning back, he folded his hands. "You know, Joy," he said evenly, "that little vanity project won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture." He paused. "Not bad for a tired old cowboy, huh?" The studio erupted in laughter and applause. But Joy wasn't finished. She was hunting now, her voice rising above the crowd. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," she snapped. "Hollywood keeps giving statues to men like you for telling the same story over and over again. Where's the creativity? Where's the progress? Do you even care what younger audiences want to see?" Clint sat motionless, letting her words hang in the air like gun smoke after a duel. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried. "You're confusing trends with substance," he said. "Trends come and go," Clint said evenly. "Good stories stay. Maybe you'd understand that if you spent less time yelling and more time listening." The audience gasped. Even a few of Joy's co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Joy leaned back, a bitter smile curling at the corners of her mouth. "Oh, so now I'm supposed to take life lessons from a man who's spent his entire career glorifying violence and macho posturing? From someone whose films teach men that fists and bullets solve everything?" Clint's gaze hardened, but his composure didn't waver. He leaned forward slightly, that famous squint locking onto her like the crosshairs of an old Western duel. "My films," he said coolly, "teach that violence has a cost. that every choice has consequences. Maybe you'd know that if you actually watched them instead of just reading the headlines. The studio erupted in laughter and applause. For the first time, Joy faltered, but only for a heartbeat. "Oh, I've seen enough," she snapped, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Enough to know you're just another relic from a time when men thought the world revolved around them." "This isn't your world anymore, Clint." For the first time that morning, Clint smiled. Not warmly, not mockingly, but with the cold assurance of a man who's been through 1,000 battles and never needed to raise his voice to win one. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But it seems I'm still here, and you're still trying to catch up." The audience exploded. Cheers, laughter, even a few gasps. Joy's face flushed crimson as she tried to compose herself, eyes narrowing into slits. Clint leaned back, calm as ever, while she fumbled for her next move. In the control room, producers exchanged frantic glances, fingers hovering over buttons in case they needed to cut to commercial. But they didn't. No one wanted to miss what came next. The air in the studio had turned thick enough to feel. You could hear the tension beneath the applause. Hearts pounding, breaths held. Joy Behar was rattled but not beaten. Not yet. What had begun as a spirited interview was now a full-blown standoff. As the cheers faded, Joy straightened in her chair, her expression tightening into resolve. "Well," she said sharply, "you seem awfully confident for someone whose entire career was built on cliches. Do you ever get tired of playing the same rugged, brooding, emotionally stunted man in every movie? Or is that just who you are?" Clint tilted his head, his eyes steady and cold as steel. "You call them cliches," he said. "I call them truths people recognize. You can dress it up however you want, Joy, but grit and honor never go out of style." Joy let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, please. You think grit and honor are all it takes? That's the problem with you old-school Hollywood guys. You think scowling at a camera makes you deep?" Clint's lip twitched. Not quite a smile. "Maybe it doesn't," he said evenly. "But it sure seems to bother you an awful lot for someone who claims not to care." The audience burst into laughter again, and this time even Joy's co-hosts couldn't quite hide their smiles. The kind of silence Joy could no longer ignore. "All right. Fine," she snapped, flipping to another cue card. "Let's talk about $1 Million Baby. A movie about a woman who, spoiler alert, gets paralyzed chasing her stupid dream. And you, the big hero, help her end her life. Tell me, Clint, how is that empowering? How is that not just another depressing story about a woman who can't make it without a man?" Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, his voice dropping lower, quieter, but heavier. "It's not about a man or a woman," he said. "It's about choices, about sacrifice, about loving someone enough to honor their wishes, even when it breaks your own heart." His words landed like a hammer. The room went still. Even the audience, rowdy just moments ago, quieted, some visibly moved. But Joy wasn't finished. Her frustration boiled over. "Oh, come on," she barked. "That's just more macho posturing wrapped in fake sensitivity. You've spent your whole career pretending to care, while cashing checks from the same old testosterone-fueled fantasy machine. Don't pretend otherwise." Clint leaned forward, closing the space between them. His gaze hardened, his tone now steel. "Pretend?" he echoed. "Joy, you've been pretending this whole time. Pretending this is about me, my movies, my career, my values. But it's not, is it?" He paused, eyes locked on hers. "This is about you, about proving something, about showing the world how tough and righteous you are by tearing someone else down." For a second, Joy froze, then let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh, that's rich," she shot back. "The stoic cowboy psychoanalyzing me? I don't need you to tell me who I am, Clint. I know exactly who I am. A woman who calls out hypocrisy when she sees it. A woman who refuses to be cowed by some Hollywood dinosaur who thinks he's better than everyone else." Clint shook his head slowly, almost pityingly. "Then why do you sound so desperate to convince yourself?" he asked quietly. The line hit like a thunderclap. Joy's face went crimson. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Oh, don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't you sit there acting like you're some noble sage come to enlighten me. You're just an actor, a lucky old man who wrote a few good parts into some undeserved legend status." Clint sat, back in his chair, unbothered, crossing one leg over the other with the ease of a man who'd already won. "Well," he said evenly, "that undeserved legend status seems to bother you a lot more than it does me." The studio erupted. Some clapping, some gasping, some too stunned to react at all. Joy's voice cut through the noise. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you're calm and collected. But underneath all that cowboy zen, you're just like every other man. Afraid of losing relevance. Afraid of becoming obsolete. Afraid of someone like me telling you your time is up." Clint's gaze didn't waver. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Dangerously so. "My time isn't up," he said, "but I can see you're running out of yours." The line sliced through the room like a blade. Even Joy's co-hosts looked away, suddenly fascinated by their notes. For a moment, just a moment, Joy looked shaken. Then she recovered, slamming her cue cards onto the table, fire flashing back into her eyes. "You want to play hardball, Clint?" she sneered. "Fine. Let's talk about your legacy. Violence, guns, toxic masculinity. You've poisoned generations of men with your macho nonsense. And now here you sit, smug and untouchable, pretending you've done the world a favor." Clint leaned in too, closing the gap until their faces were just feet apart. His voice dropped to a near whisper, the kind of quiet that makes everyone lean in to hear. "And yet," Clint said evenly, "here you sit, trying so hard to tear me down, and still not tall enough to reach me." The audience gasped, then silence. Joy leaned back slowly, lips pressed tight, hands trembling just slightly. Clint didn't move. He sat there calm, composed, almost amused. The tension thickened until it felt like the whole studio was holding its breath. Everyone knew this wasn't going to cool down. It was going to explode. Joy adjusted her glasses, jaw set, eyes locked on Clint. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its practiced humor. It was lower now, sharper. "Oh, you think you're clever, don't you?" she said. "You think that quiet cowboy act still works? That it still scares people?" Clint didn't flinch. He simply straightened his jacket. "Joy," he said, voice calm as ever, "I don't have to intimidate anyone. You're doing a fine job of making yourself look small all on your own." A ripple of murmurs rolled through the crowd. The other co-hosts stared down at their notes, pretending to read. Joy's face flushed. She leaned forward, louder now, trying to claw back control. "You know what I think?" she snapped. "I think you're scared. Scared the world's finally catching up. That people are realizing you're just a relic of a toxic era that should have ended decades ago." Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, the faintest edge entering his tone. "You keep calling me a relic, Joy," he said. "But what does that make you, sitting here trying to tear down someone who's done more in his lifetime than you've managed in your entire career?" The audience erupted again. Gasps, whispers, a few uneasy laughs. Joy slammed her palms onto the table with a sharp crack. "That's rich," she barked, coming from a man who spent 60 years playing the same damn character. The brooding brute who solves everything with his fists or his gun. "You glorified violence and called it art." Clint nodded once, expression unreadable. "You're right about one thing," he said. "I've played a lot of violent men. But if you'd ever watched any of those films past the first 10 minutes, you'd see they're about what that kind of life costs. I wasn't glorifying it. I was exposing it." For the first time, Joy hesitated. Just a flicker. Before leaning in again, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Don't you dare lecture me about art," she spat. "Your films are excuses for insecure men to feel tough. You're a mascot for the worst kind of masculinity. And you're still playing the same role. Because you don't know how to be anything else." Something cold flashed in Clint's eyes. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You seem awfully sure of who I am," he said quietly. "It's a shame you haven't spent half as much time figuring out who you are." That landed like a hammer. Even Joy's co-hosts stiffened in their seats. But Joy only got louder, refusing to give him an inch. "Oh, please," she scoffed, throwing up her hands. "I know exactly who I am. I've spent my life standing up to bullies like you, men who think they can silence women with a glare and a one-liner. I've been calling out your type since before you even knew how to say, 'Go ahead, make my day.'" Clint's gaze never wavered. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice until the entire room had to lean in to hear. "And yet," he murmured, "here you are. Still yelling, still trying to prove something, still mistaking noise for strength." Joy froze. Just for a second. Her words caught mid-breath. The murmurs in the crowd swelled. The tension was electric. Her hand trembled as she grabbed another cue card, trying to steady herself. "All right," she snapped. "Let's talk about your so-called masterpieces, shall we? Dirty Harry, a violent cop who breaks the law to get his way. Unforgiven, a drunk murderer painted as a hero. Million-Dollar Baby, a woman who dies because her dream was too big. That's your legacy, Clint. Violence, pain, failure. And somehow you're proud of it." Clint's jaw flexed once. He folded his hands calmly on the table and met her glare. "My legacy," he said finally, voice steady and measured, "is telling the truth. Even when it's ugly. Even when people like you can't handle it. I don't make movies for approval, Joy. I make them for the people who see themselves in them. The broken, the struggling, the ones trying to do better. You don't have to like that. But you don't get to rewrite it," Joy sneered, her voice rising, brittle and sharp. "Oh, please," she shouted. "You're just another old man clinging to relevance because you can't face that the world's moved on without you. You should have retired years ago, before you embarrassed yourself." For the first time, Clint stood. Slowly, deliberately. His full height and presence seemed to fill the room. The audience fell silent. He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on hers. "Joy," he said evenly, "I've never needed to chase relevance, and I don't need your permission to keep doing what I love. But you might want to ask yourself what happens when the cameras stop rolling and there's nobody left to clap for you." Joy's face drained of color. Her hands gripped the chair arms so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a long moment they just stared at each other, two forces unwilling to yield. The air between them was thick, heavy, irreversible. Then Clint buttoned his jacket and sat back down, never breaking eye contact. The whole studio held its breath. Everyone knew. The final act of this clash had begun. Joy forced a laugh, but her voice cracked. "Oh, what's the matter, Clint? Running out of clever little lines? Or finally realizing the world doesn't revolve around you?" Clint didn't react. He rose again, this time removing his microphone with quiet precision. "You know," he said calmly, "when I walked in here today, I thought I was sitting down with professionals. I thought we'd talk about my work, maybe even have some fun. But instead, you've turned this into a spectacle." Joy shot back, voice shrill now. "You don't get to play the victim here, Clint. Not after everything you've done, the messages you've sent. You don't get to act like you're above criticism." Clint met her gaze, unflinching. "Criticism is fine," he said. "But what you've done here isn't criticism. It's bitterness. And I don't have to stand here and soak up another second of it." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Clint's voice cut cleanly through hers. Quiet, final. "You invited me here as a guest," he said, "and treated me like an enemy. So I'll save you the trouble of kicking me out." He set his microphone gently on the table. "Good luck with your show," he added. "But if you're wondering why people stopped coming back, you might want to replay this episode and take a good, hard look." The studio was dead silent as Clint Eastwood walked off the set. Joy sat frozen, her face pale, a mix of fury, disbelief, and humiliation. When the door closed behind him, the audience erupted, some in applause, others whispering in shock. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable, a moment that would be replayed, dissected, and debated for years. And that's how Clint Eastwood walked out of The View with his dignity intact, leaving Joy Behar to reckon with the fallout of her own bitterness.